Adding the finishing touches to a part may seem like a short step, but there are many considerations to be made. First, removing the support material should be done with care and may require tools to get rid of all the leftover material. There are also washing and curing machines for SLA printed parts made from resin. Second, you want to make sure you check that the part will function as intended. This can mean fitting the part in the larger assembly or fitting it into other parts to make sure everything lines up. From here you can continue the finishing process. You'll want to sand the part by hand or by using a microfile to make it smooth. If the part was printed in sections, you'll also want to make sure those will assemble properly, and then glue them in place. Finally, you can paint the model however you'd like, putting it to use and on display in its final state. Once a printed part is removed from the build plate, it's time to remove the attached support material. Some material can be removed by hand. In other cases, removing supports can be made easier by using a small set of cutters or even needle nose pliers. Because the process can be tedious, it's recommended to optimize the amount of support material in the slicer software to minimize how much it will generate. When using an FDM printer such as the Ultimaker or Dremel models shown here, the orientation of the part in the slicer software can aid in reducing the amount of supports or the need for them entirely. In the case of printing an open-ended box, if you printed it with the open end on one side, you'd need to add supports. However, if you printed it standing up with the open end at the top, you wouldn't need any additional supports. With the introduction of PVA material and being able to use it in a dual extruder machine, such as the Ultimaker 3 we're using, you can print water-soluble support material that only requires a tank of water to remove the support material as shown. While it may take longer to complete, it also allows for internal support structure that you wouldn't be able to get at to remove otherwise. Raft material can also be difficult to remove. However, using a raft can be helpful in printing large parts on an FDM printer. When printing a part using an SLA printer, such as this Formlabs model, the part is typically printed at an angle intentionally, and support material is added by default. Oftentimes these supports can be removed by hand, however using small cutting tools may also be needed. Because these parts are made from liquid resin, the parts may still have excess resin coating its exterior. This resin can be removed by washing it by hand with isopropyl alcohol. Excess UV resin used in the Form 2 machine is easily removed by using their specially designed machine called the Form Wash. It's optimized for removing all the remaining resin simply by agitating the solution while the parts are submerged and lifting them out to air dry when complete. There's also a lid that keeps the alcohol fumes contained inside the machine. Parts average about 15 minutes of soak time to complete. Resin parts also need some time to cure under UV light. This can be done by placing them in contact with sunlight for a period of time. Formlabs also created the Form Cure machine that rotates the part on a turntable while shining UV light directly onto the part. It also includes a heating system that preheats to get the parts ready for optimum post-curing. Both processes help solidify the part to the correct material properties after it's been cleaned. Before investing too much time in the post-processing of a part, it's best to visually inspect the part to make sure that all features are there, in case it needs to be printed again. Because the part will tend to dimensionally change for a short period of time after it's printed, it's best to ignore any sort of dimensional issues until after it's cured, and you can verify if it will work to meet your needs. Once the parts are clean, and most of the support material has been removed, the use of some fine sandpaper or fine microfiles will aid in removing leftover support attachment points. Layer lines can also be smoothed out by sanding. This will help to achieve a smooth, finished part, which gets much closer to the final look and feel of the part. Once the printed part is cured and sanded down to the intended smoothness, you can begin checking that the part will function as its intended purpose. Because printed parts' dimensions will change, especially right after being printed, it's best to wait a few hours to allow it to stabilize. In addition, the features that fit together need to be checked that they will work. For instance, printing a 1mm hole and a 1mm rod will not allow them to fit together after they're printed. It's best to allow for some clearance, which can easily be added by slightly scaling one of the parts in the slicer software. And because material shrinkage is never uniform in all directions, it may take a few iterations of printed parts to get the fit and scale just right. You can closely estimate the shrinkage of a material by printing any one of the many dimensional test parts found online. But be aware that each machine may produce different results, and results can also vary between different batches of material. In any case, always be prepared to print a part more than once to get the final fit and function you desire. If you printed a part that needed to be broken up into multiple sections, since it wouldn't fit in the machine's build volume, you want to be sure that they fit together before using any adhesive. This is also a good time to consider part orientation when printing on an FDM printer, because layers can easily separate. Printing a part where the layers are perpendicular to any sort of stress will be ideal in making sure it won't break apart between weak layers. Once they're ready to be glued together, you can apply superglue and fit them together. This type of adhesive works well on many 3D printed parts, and it gets the job done quickly. If you're unsure if a certain type of glue will work, find some scrap parts and test glue them to make sure it works. With all the sections assembled and the parts sanded down to your desired smoothness, the parts can be painted with any standard spray paints or brushed on with model paints. As expected, the cleaner the part is from any sort of dust or cleaning solutions, the better the paint will adhere and dry. Now your model is ready to be put to use or set on display for others to admire.